gray ash fell from the sky where clouds once drifted lazily, softened only by the endless dust swirling in the wind. The silhouette of a collapsed bridge loomed in the distance, its twisted metal arcing over a stagnant canal dotted with debris and bones. Torn banners, their symbols unrecognizable after years of corrosion, flapped listlessly against broken concrete pillars. Survivors huddled in small enclaves behind barricades of rusted car shells and chunks of collapsed buildings, wary of the ever-present threat that roamed the outskirts, beasts born of twisted evolution. With each passing day, the stench of decay thickened, while desperate whispers of new horrors spread from one trembling settlement to the next. In the feeble glow of a flickering lantern, Rhea crouched on the ground, rummaging through a battered metal case. She found scraps of dried bread and half a box of antibiotic capsules, precious supplies that could mean the difference between life and death. The distant howls and clicks of the monstrous creatures never left her mind, reminding her that she was still alive only by chance. She rose, scanning the horizon, knowing she needed more than just luck and meager provisions to survive much longer in this broken world. Clad in mismatched clothing with metal plates tied to her forearms and chest for armor, she had no illusions of being safe. Her heart pounded with vigilant terror, never forgetting how quickly predators lurked behind crumbling walls. A faint voice caught her attention. She whirled to see a figure stagger toward her down a ragged side street. The man was clutching his stomach, sputtering with labored breaths. Rhea glanced behind him, half expecting to see a hideous creature bounding after him. Instead, there was only emptiness and drifting ash. Without hesitation, she slid under his shoulder to support him, feeling him tremble. It was not the first time she had encountered a wounded stranger. Common sense said to leave him. Resources were scarce, but something in her heart refused to let another human fade away without trying. Carefully, she guided him toward the flickering lantern, determined to keep them both alive just a bit longer. By nightfall, Rhea had discovered that the stranger's name was Damon, a scrappy trader from a neighboring settlement called Oriel's Pit. He was fleeing an attack by a feral pack of beasts that had thoroughly decimated his caravan. Even hours later, his body remained pale, suffering from wounds that bled slowly in seeping trails. Across his torso were deep gouges, likely from the elongated claws of one of those diseased predators. She could see fear etched on his face and dreaded the possibility of him turning feral or dying before morning. The world was rife with strange mutations. Every morsel of flesh, every drop of blood was a potential breeding ground for monstrous changes. She prayed that Damon's wounds weren't infected beyond the point of no return. As Rhea treated him as best as she could, her eyes fell upon the rumors that lingered in the chatter of drifters. Rogue surgeons said to be hidden among the broken city ruins, offering unimaginable cybernetic enhancements at a grim cost. They were rumored to be a collection of outcasts from leading biomedical facilities, exiled into the apocalypse after the Great Collapse. With specialized knowledge, they would graft steel and composite limbs onto survivors, strengthen fractured bones with alloy plates, even supplement failing organs with advanced biotech. But the rumors also warned that the surgeons operated with cold, clinical precision, indifferent to pain or morality. Yet in a world overrun by hungry horrors, many were desperate enough to seek any advantage. Damon's eyes flickered open. I need help, he rasped through cracked lips. My settlement can't handle these attacks much longer. I've heard stories about these surgeons. They can rebuild me, make me strong enough to protect my people. His voice trailed off and he coughed violently, his body reliving the trauma of the ambush. Rhea had never considered going to those surgeons. The rumors petrified her. Tales of missing limbs replaced with glistening steel, organs swapped out like faulty spare parts. But here was a flesh and blood testament to how powerless an ordinary human was against the new apex predators. Her protective instincts, especially now that she'd formed a tenuous bond with Damon, urged her to take the risk. If there's a chance they can help you, she said quietly, pressing a rag into his wounds, then I'll go with you. We'll find them. She tried to keep her voice steady, but her hand shook around the cloth. She was uncertain whether the surgeons were real or myth, saviors or butchers. All she knew was that they were rumored to operate in the labyrinth of old hospitals southwest of the city center. At first light, Rhea helped Damon to his feet. His condition was worse, and each step brought a wincing grimace to his face. They advanced slowly along cobblestone streets clogged with ruined cars, weaving around skeletons wrapped in tattered uniforms. Every so often they heard the haunting echoes of beastly roars. Rhea gripped a makeshift spear tighter, scanning rooftops for any sign of a prowling threat. Damon offered directions in gasps, pointing toward a battered sign that read, in chipped lettering, Linden Medical Campus. The area was notorious. Many travelers avoided it because of the rumored presence of savage experiments that lurked within. Yet the surgeon's domain was rumored to sprawl beneath that battered hospital complex, an underground labyrinth of corridors once devoted to advanced surgical procedures. As they neared, the roads became narrower, overshadowed by the hollow shells of collapsed wings that used to bustle with medical staff. Now, a sense of dread permeated the scorched walls, faint echoes of the city's final screams still reverberating in the hushed air. Shoved behind a half-collapsed loading dock, they found a single steel door, its surface blackened by fire and pockmarked with bullet holes. A freshly scratched symbol, a stylized cross with metallic arms, was etched into the door's face. Rhea glanced at Damon, feeling chills rippled through her. This was undoubtedly a sign of those rumored surgeons. With trembling hands, she pressed on the door. It screeched open, revealing a dank stairwell lit by a single fluorescent tube still flickering overhead. She could not help but wonder how these surgeons managed to power such lights in a world perpetually teetering on the brink of darkness. A mound of debris made progress slow as they ventured deeper into the underground corridors. Finally, they came into a wide windowless room lined with bunk-like platforms, supply crates, and an ominous array of surgical instruments. 3 figures in long, dark coats emerged from the shadowed corners. Their faces were concealed behind tinted goggles and half-masks, giving them a detached, clinical aura that made Rhea's pulse pound. One figure, its voice distorted by the mask, commanded her to place Damon on a nearby cot. Uziel's breath caught in her throat as she watched the surgeons circle Damon. They moved with an almost choreographed precision, first removing his tattered shirt to examine the injuries, then filling syringes with a fluorescent fluid that glowed eerily in the dim light. Damon moaned weakly, barely coherent. The largest of the surgeons, an individual of indeterminate gender with broad shoulders and mechanical instruments attached to a harness, injected him in the arm. Instantly, Damon's eyes rolled back and his body relaxed. The second surgeon, more slender with scalpels attached to their belt, initiated an automated scanning device that whirred and beeped. The third observed intently, as though calibrating a plan of action. Rhea wanted to speak, to demand some guarantee they wouldn't corrupt Damon further or cause him undue agony. Her fear was overridden by the possibility that these were the only people who could save him. So she stood there, her heart hammering in her ears, uncertain if she would watch her new friend become some twisted amalgamation of steel and flesh. The trio exchanged low whispers, peppered with medical jargon. One turned to Rhea with a dispassionate voice, filtered through the mask. "His condition is dire," they said. "Internal bleeding has begun. The creature's saliva contains a necrotic agent. We must replace compromised tissue, or he will not last the week." She swallowed. "Do whatever you can," she managed. The lead surgeon nodded and signaled for the others to wheel Damon away. Rhea moved to follow, but a gloved hand blocked her. "We prefer no visitors during procedures. If you want him to live, you must trust us." At that moment, the reality set in. Damon's fate rested in the hands of these mysterious medics. Rhea stood alone, helpless, as the clang of steel doors reverberated down the corridor. Outside the small operating chamber, she listened to the whir of drills and hiss of pneumatic sutures. She silently hoped they were truly seeking to heal rather than simply experimenting on a newfound subject. Hours passed. Rhea paced the hallway littered with broken crates and half-disassembled machines. She touched the tarnished steel plates on her own makeshift armor, reflecting on the possibility that Damon would emerge augmented in ways she couldn't even fathom. The occasional grunt or muffled cry echoed from behind the door, forcing Rhea to bite her lip in concern. How different would Damon be when he came out? Would his expression remain familiar, or would the surgeons chisel it away, carving a new man from metal and wiring? Eventually, the surgeons stepped back into the hallway. Their coats were smeared with blackish fluid. The masked spokesperson offered a simple, measured statement. The procedure is complete. He will need rest, but he is stable. Transformation partial. Rhea inched forward, fear and curiosity gnawing at her. They led her into a recovery chamber, where Damon lay on a metal gurney, unconscious but breathing. At first glance, he looked almost the same. She sighed in relief. Then she noticed the bandages around his torso and the curious metal plating peeking from beneath. His right arm was swathed in new wrappings, as though some structure lay hidden within, the lead surgeon explained in precise terms. We replaced sections of damaged muscle fibers with synthetics and installed a subdermal plating for protection. His right arm had to be reinforced with a carbon steel framework. He will bear surgical scars, but in time he will be stronger and faster than before. That is what you wanted, yes? Rhea could only nod. She was grateful to see Damon alive, even if changed. A trembling hand reached to brush his hair aside. His face seemed at peace, yet she couldn't stop the swirl of questions in her mind. What would his future be with these modifications? And how could he ever see himself as the same person? Days went by as Damon's body adjusted to the enhancements. The surgeons provided him with carefully measured injections of stimulants, pushing his body to integrate the synthetic fibers. He could grip a steel bar that once took all his strength to lift and bend it without effort. He marveled, though at times with a hint of fear, wondering if he was still fully human. During those recovery days, Rhea noticed the surgeons had other patients, all in various stages of healing or transformation. Some had more obvious augments, entire cybernetic limbs, mechanical eyes with red-linsed irises, or steel vertebrae protruding along their back. They lay on bunks, silent or moaning, tended by the surgeons and half a dozen assistants who scuttled about with trays of vials. Despite the bleakness, a glimmer of hope flickered in Rhea's chest. If Damon could walk on his own again, if he could defend himself and others from the beasts, perhaps they stood a chance of regaining a semblance of security. More than once, she found herself eyeing her own frail body. The scars she wore on her shins and forearms were reminders of close calls and near-death escapes. The prospect drifted through her mind. If a piece of steel plating lay beneath her skin, would her chances of survival soar? Yet caution warred with curiosity. Those enhanced by the surgeons seemed caught in a delicate balance, protected by their iron limbs but haunted by sleepless nights, their eyes gleaming with a metallic emptiness. One night, while Damon slept, Rhea explored the facility's dim corridors, stumbling across a sealed door from behind which she heard faint rattling. She pressed her ear to the metal and caught muffled pleas. Her heart froze. Was it a survivor in pain? A subject gone wrong? The corridors offered no answers, only oppressive silence. She returned to Damon's side, determined to keep watch until they could leave. Damus. A week passed, and Damon's strength grew significantly. He studied his new implants with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The surgeons, though aloof, explained how to maintain the synthetic components. If you don't keep the neural interface clean, the largest warned in a monotone voice, the metal can corrode, and your body may reject it. Such rejection can be fatal. Damon accepted the instructions with measured calm. He was no fool. He understood the line between salvation and damnation here was razor thin. While preparing to depart, Rhea and Damon discovered they were not the only enhanced warriors leaving that day. A few others, boasting metallic frames, filed out of the bunk room with grim purpose. Rumors spread among these newly minted cyborgs that the beasts had multiplied in the outskirts, forming larger packs that attacked settlements en masse. More enhancements would be needed, more expansions, to keep the tide of terror at bay. The surgeons looked upon their patients with a detached sense of duty, urging them to protect themselves and perhaps come back for further upgrades if the beasts evolved further themselves. Rhea and Damon set off together. He carried a heavier pack with startling ease, showcasing physical prowess that would have been unimaginable before. Rhea felt a renewed sense of security, but also a prickling sense that they were being watched. As they navigated through the city's skeletal remains, the dull gray sky opened to a swirl of soot-laden wind. Damon climbed effortlessly over jagged piles of rubble, scanning around with a new sharpness in his gaze. Rhea matched his pace as best she could, the ache in her unaltered limbs intensifying with each step. Despite that discomfort, a small part of her exhaled relief that she remained fully human, for now. Conflict found them before they reached Oriel's pit. In a deserted plaza flanked by hollow storefronts, a half-dozen beasts skulked in the shadows, monstrous silhouettes hunched and sinewy. Once, these might have been large dogs or wolves, but mutated by plague and desperation, their jaws were elongated and their hides patched with ragged fur. Daylight made their eyes glow with an unnatural sheen, and thick saliva dripped between rows of jagged teeth. Damon positioned himself in front of Rhea without hesitation. One creature leaped. Damon's enhanced reflexes kicked in. He spun his metal-braced arm up to block. Claws raked across the steel plating, sparks flying. With a jarring blow, Damon slammed the beast to the ground, leaving a dent in the cracked pavement. Another charged in from the side, forcing Rhea to jab her spear. She missed the heart but scored a wound along its shoulder. It snarled, jaws snapping inches from her face. Panic flared inside her, but then Damon was there, delivering a swift strike that snapped the creature's spine. He pulsated with a feral energy, adrenaline coursing through his augmented frame like a live current. Sensing the threat, the remaining beasts circled warily, but hunger outweighed caution. Two attacked at once, launching themselves at Damon's unprotected flank. He pivoted, raising his augmented arm to shield. The first beast's claws caught on splintered bones from its predecessor, tangling it momentarily. Damon seized the opening, smashing its skull with a savage blow that left him gasping. Rhea thrust her spear into the second attacker, but the handle snapped against its thick hide. The twisted creature lunged, hissing. Damon dove forward, steel joint pivoting with inhuman precision, and hammered the attacker until it collapsed. The smell of blood and burnt metal hung in the air. Damon's chest heaved, partly from exertion, partly from a fresh, primitive rage that lingered in his eyes. Blood oozed from shallow cuts where the plating barely fell short of protecting him, but none looked life-threatening. "I'm all right," Damon panted, noticing Rhea's fearful expression. He glanced at the battered remains of the beasts, gore trickling between the cracks, and his wide-eyed confusion was evident. He'd never fought like this before. She touched his arm gently, feeling the unnatural hardness beneath the bandages. He was both soldier and victim, forced into a role by cruelty of circumstance. "We should go," she whispered, knowing more beasts might be close by. Damon nodded stiffly. They trudged on, each step forging an unspoken bond of survival. When Oriel's pit came into view, Damon stopped dead. The settlement was under siege. Crude barricades had been trampled, corpses littered the ground, and a monstrous shape prowled along the rooftops. From a distance, Rhea could make out ragged human forms gathered behind partially collapsed walls, desperately firing crossbows and makeshift firearms at the encroaching horrors. Damon's eyes blazed with urgent need. His people were dying. All that remained of his community might be snuffed out within minutes. Without waiting, he sprinted into the fray. Rhea followed close behind, her heart hammering. The metallic clang of Damon's reinforced steps echoed through the chaos as he slammed into a hulking beast with savage force. The blow sent the creature crashing into a wooden barricade, splintering it into shards. Fearless, Damon grabbed another monster's throat with his carbon steel hand, mechanical servos whining with lethal power. The beast struggled, howling, but Damon's hold did not waver. Rhea, lacking the advantage of cybernetics, had to rely on cunning. She circled a corner, luring a smaller creature toward her before jamming a sharpened pipe into its side. It yelped in pain, thrashing blindly, which allowed one of the settlement's defenders to finish it off with a crossbow bolt. The defenders were clearly astonished by Damon's unstoppable momentum. Fortified by synthetic adrenaline and hardened fibers, he tore through the savage creatures like they were made of brittle wood. In time, the share of beasts dwindled, their ferocity no match for coordinated defense, plus Damon's newly forged might. When the last hideous figure collapsed in a heap, the remaining settlement dwellers emerged from half-toppled structures, eyes wide with relief and wonder. Tense silence filled the air. People whispered Damon's name in disbelief, stepping carefully around him like he might be more machine than man. He stared back, as uncertain as they were. Rio watched from a distance, sadness and admiration mingling in her gaze. In the aftermath, Oriel's pit smelled of gunpowder and blood. Damon helped gather the wounded, applying techniques he'd learned from the rogue surgeons. His upgraded arm allowed him to carry injured survivors to safer ground. Those who recognized him regarded his modifications with reverence rather than fear. One elder looked at Damon's bandaged torso and quietly said, "We might need more of what you have." Some recognized a harsh truth. Plain human flesh was too weak against the relentless onslaught of evolved monstrosities. They spoke in hushed voices about traveling to the surgeon's lair, submitting themselves to the terrifying yet compelling reality of cybernetic augmentation. Rhea observed this longing in their eyes. She understood it all too well, the desire to stand a chance in a world where nature had been perverted into a lethal predator. Knowing it was only a matter of time before the next wave of creatures arrived, she felt a pang in her chest. Perhaps this was the early formation of a new kind of warrior men and women voluntarily shedding pieces of their humanity to reclaim the land from monsters. Damon approached her, wiping sweat from his brow. "They need me here," he said softly. "I can't leave them defenseless. Everything I've done, everything those surgeons did, maybe it was all for this moment." She reached for him, gently touching the cold metal beneath his skin. "You don't have to face this alone," she replied, swallowing hard. She pictured the scaled prosthetics, the shining steel limbs, and the surgeons who waited to transform anyone who asked. Part of her was terrified, but another part, the part of her that had to rely on a single flimsy spear to fight, wondered if she could watch helplessly as the beasts ravaged them again. A survivor no older than 17 limped by with a fractured leg, tears streaking grime on her cheeks. Damon looked at Rhea, searching her face. "I don't want you to endure that pain," he said quietly. "I wouldn't wish these implants on anyone, but this is what it takes now." She nodded, hugging herself. "Maybe if there were no other way, if it meant survival, I would do it." The taste of those words was bitter, yet in a fragile corner of her mind, she accepted the possibility. Damn it. That night, a ragged group of would-be defenders assembled. They were battered, grieving, worn down to the bone. Damon stood before them, the flickering glow of a bonfire dancing across the metallic ridges under his bandages. "These beasts are growing in numbers," he said, voice echoing. "We can't survive on hope alone. We've seen what the surgeons can do. They can turn us into something stronger, a new line of defense in this broken world." The survivors exchanged glances. Some looked horrified at the thought of letting these masked figures cut into them with scalpels and drills. Others, desperate for a fighting chance, seemed ready to march there immediately. Rhea stayed by Damon's side, feeling each breath rattle in her chest as she weighed the future. She recalled the sealed door in the surgeon's lair and the muffled cries she'd heard, uncertain whether those had been necessary steps in the pursuit of strength or the tortured remnants of freedom lost. Finally, an older man stepped forward, face creased with age. "We have no choice," he said, his voice hoarse. "If we don't adapt, these monsters will tear us apart. Bring the surgeons here, or lead us to them. We're living on borrowed time anyway." Damon nodded grimly, exhaling slowly. "We'll guide anyone who's prepared. But no illusions. Once you submit to that knife, you will be changed forever." The group stared at him, resolution growing in weary eyes. The weight of collective survival pressed upon them like an iron fist around their hearts. As dawn approached, armed with their battered weapons and unwavering desperation, the survivors of Oriel's pit prepared to embark on a perilous journey back to the labyrinth beneath Linden Medical Campus. Their single, flickering lantern shone against the pallor of the morning sky, a fragile beacon of hope as they marched past ruins, deeper into the unknown. Rhea walked alongside Damon, her pulse brimming with worry. She did not know what horrors awaited them, but she was certain that in this world, Besieged by monstrosities, a new generation of iron-limbed warriors was rising, and with them the tenuous promise of survival.